Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. Human mechanic saved a useless mutant dragon. Then it grew into this. Someone had left it to die. Anger simmered beneath Sam's skin, but he pushed it down. There wasn't time for that. He reached for the emergency medkit he kept under the workbench, pulling out a vial of nutrient-infused fluid. It wasn't meant for dragons, but it was better than nothing. He filled a small dropper and carefully pressed it to the creature's lips. "Come on," he muttered, "you have to drink." At first, the dragon didn't respond, then, slowly, it parted its tiny jaws, weakly lapping at the liquid. Sam exhaled in relief, repeating the process until he was sure the creature had taken enough. He wrapped it in another layer of blankets, then adjusted the heat lamps above the workbench, ensuring the warmth reached its fragile body. Hours passed. Sam worked quietly, keeping an eye on the dragon as he tinkered with an old engine core. Every so often, he would glance over, watching for any sign of improvement, and then, just as he was about to give up for the night, he heard it, a sound, a soft, barely audible purr. Sam turned, his breath catching. The dragon had shifted slightly, its head resting against the blanket, its chest rising and falling in a steadier rhythm, its tail flicked just a little, its small wings twitching as it adjusted to the warmth. It was still weak, still fragile, but it was alive. Sam leaned back against the workbench, rubbing a hand over his face. "Well," he muttered, "guess you're stuck with me now." The dragon let out a soft chirp. Sam smirked. Yeah, he said, shaking his head. "I'll think of a name for you in the morning." He stood, stretching his sore muscles, before turning toward the cot in the corner. For the first time in years, he didn't mind the idea of staying up all night because this time he had something worth staying up for. The morning light streamed through the workshop's reinforced glass panels, casting a golden hue over the mess of tools, wires, and half-assembled machines. Sam stirred from his cot in the corner, blinking groggy as the familiar scent of engine oil and metal filled his lungs. Then he remembered, his gaze snapped to the workbench. The little dragon was still there, bundled in blankets, its tiny body barely visible beneath the layers. For a second, fear clawed at Sam's chest. Was it breathing? Was that a small twitching movement under the fabric? It made him exhale in relief. The dragon, Bolt, as Sam had decided to name him, was alive. Sam sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, his body achy from the previous night and the hours spent monitoring the little creature, making sure its frail heartbeat didn't fade. He hadn't planned to get attached, it had just happened. He pushed himself up and walked over, careful not to make too much noise. Bolt was still curled up, his tiny wings tucked close to his body, his metallic-like scales having regained a faint glow, no longer as dull and lifeless as before. That was good, but the real test was whether he had enough strength to move. Sam crouched beside the workbench and reached out slowly. "All right, little guy, let's see if you're awake." At the sound of his voice, Bolt twitched, his ears perked up, and his body stiffened slightly. Sam waited, barely breathing. Then, very slowly, Bolt lifted his head. Sam's chest tightened. The dragon's golden eyes blinked sluggishly, still unfocused, still too weak but aware. He tilted his head, letting out a small, croaky chirp. Sam grinned. "Well, look who's up." Bolt attempted to shift his tiny claws, pressing against the blanket, but his movements were clumsy, uncoordinated. He collapsed after barely lifting himself an inch. "Easy, easy," Sam said, reaching out to steady him. Bolt let out a soft whimper, pressing into the warmth of Sam's palm. The simple trust in that small gesture made something in Sam's chest ache. He had spent his whole life fixing broken things, machines, ships, weapons, but this was different. This wasn't just fixing, this was saving. "You've got fight in you," Sam murmured. He ran a careful hand down Bolt's back, feeling the ridges of his underdeveloped wings. "That's good, you're going to need it." Bolt chirped again, softer this time, and Sam smirked. Yeah, you're welcome. His stomach rumbled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since yesterday. He sighed and moved toward the small kitchen unit at the back of the workshop, rummaging through a pile of ration packs as he grabbed some protein biscuits. A sudden crackling noise made him freeze. Sparks danced across the workbench. Sam turned sharply. Bolt had shifted slightly, his claws brushing against the exposed wires of a disassembled circuit board, but instead of a short circuit or a small electrical discharge, the metal lit up, a faint electric blue glow pulsed where Bolt's claws had touched the wire. Sam's breath hitched. What the hell? Bolt blinked at his own claws as if surprised, then chirped again. The glow faded, the sparks dying out. The circuit board, previously fried and beyond repair, was humming. It was working. Sam slowly stepped forward, staring at Bolt in disbelief. You fixed it? Bolt tilted his head innocently, then sneezed. A tiny spark of blue energy flickered from his nostrils, disappearing into the air. Sam let out a breathless laugh. Well, I'll be damned. The hours that followed were filled with tests, not the cruel, clinical kind that corporate labs would have conducted, but careful, curious experiments. Sam wanted to understand Bolt's strange abilities. He gathered broken circuits, busted power cores, rusted servo motors, anything beyond repair, then he let Bolt touch them. Each time, the same thing happened, a soft hum, a flicker of energy, a pulse of blue light, and the dead machine worked again. It wasn't perfect, some things only sparked briefly before dying out again, some barely reacted at all, but the pattern was clear. Bolt had some kind of natural ability to interact with technology, to breathe life into machines the way Sam had once breathed life into ships. Sam sat on the floor beside the workbench, arms crossed, watching his little Bolt probe curiously at an old, broken communicator. You shouldn't even exist, Sam muttered. Bolt perked up his ears, twitching. I mean, I've heard stories about dragons, Sam continued, rubbing the back of his neck. Big, fire-breathing, terrifying, but you're something else. Bolt chirped, nudging the communicator closer. The moment his claws made contact, the screen flickered to life. Sam let out a low whistle. Yeah, definitely something else. Bolt huffed, then attempted to stand again. This time, he didn't immediately collapse. Sam leaned forward. Come on, you can do it. Bolt's small limbs trembled, his wings twitched, his tail flicked for balance, then he took one shaky step. Sam grinned. That's it. Bolt's second step was more confident. By the third, he had reached the edge of the workbench, his claws gripping the surface carefully. Sam reached out just in case he slipped, but Bolt seemed determined. With a surprising burst of energy, he leapt forward straight into Sam's chest. Sam let out a startled goof, barely managing to catch him. Bolt clung to his shirt, his tiny claws gripping the fabric, then, as if proud of himself, he puffed out his chest and let out a triumphant chirp. Sam stared at him, then burst out laughing. You little menace, he said, ruffling Bolt's head. Grinning, he added, all right, I guess you're getting stronger. Bolt chirped again, nuzzling against Sam's hand for the first time in years. Sam felt something settle inside him. He had spent so long fixing broken machines, surrounded by cold, lifeless metal, but this was different. This was alive, and maybe, just maybe, fixing things wasn't the only thing he was meant to do, maybe he was meant to protect something too. As Bolt clambered onto his shoulder, someone. The days after Bolt's first real steps were filled with a strange new energy in Sam's workshop. The tiny dragon's recovery was nothing short of a miracle. The frail, nearly lifeless creature Sam had pulled from the wreck was now climbing across his workbenches, chirping at rusted engines, and trying to take apart power converters with his tiny claws. Sam had never considered himself the fatherly type. He had always been a loner, content to tinker with old ship parts and keep to himself, but now there was a persistent, excitable dragon following him everywhere, demanding attention, chewing on electrical wires, and, more often than not, getting into trouble. One morning, As Sam was elbow-deep in a ship's broken propulsion unit, he heard an odd clicking noise from across the room. He turned just in time to see Bolt perched at the top of a pile of scrap metal, his head tilted at a broken robotic arm. "Don't even think about it," Sam warned. Bolt chirped innocently, then, before Sam could stop him, the little dragon reached out a claw and touched the arm's exposed wiring. A spark of blue light shot through the metal, the robotic arm twitched. Bolt jumped back, startled, letting out a squawk. The arm jerked again, its servos were working weakly. Sam sighed, wiping grease from his hands. "You really can't help yourself, can you?" Bolt blinked, then cautiously nudged the robotic arm again. The energy flickered through the circuits, and for a moment the old piece of machinery moved, as if trying to wake up from a deep sleep. Sam crouched beside him, studying the arm as it twitched under Bolt's influence. He had seen what Bolt could do with small electronics, but this was different. "You're not just fixing them," Sam murmured. "You're powering them." Bolt tilted his head as if waiting for Sam to explain further. Sam exhaled. "I don't think you're like other dragons." He had suspected it for a while now. Dragons, if they even still existed in the galaxy, weren't known for their connection to machines, but Bolt's abilities were unnatural in the best way possible. Sam stood up, running a hand through his hair. "I need to test something." He grabbed an old, completely fried processor core from the workbench and placed it in front of Bolt. "All right, little guy, do your thing." Bolt sniffed it, then tapped it with his claw. A low hum filled the air, the dead processor flickered with life, glowing faintly with blue energy. It wasn't a full restoration, but it was enough for Sam to know Bolt wasn't just a fluke, he was something more, and that meant there were probably others out there who would want him. Sam's stomach twisted. He found Bolt abandoned, thrown away like scrap metal. Had someone known about his abilities? Had someone discarded him because of them? His grip tightened. Whoever had left Bolt to die had made a mistake, because now Sam was never letting him go. The first sign of trouble came a week later. Sam had spent the morning reinforcing Bolt's sleeping space, modifying an old thermal regulator to keep him warm through the cold desert nights. The little dragon, meanwhile, had been playing with a set of loose screws, his claws clicking against the metal as he flicked them across the workbench like a game. Then, Sam heard the noise. It was subtle, nearly drowned out by the usual hum of the workshop, a distant engine rumbling. But not just any engine, a ship. Sam's hands stilled. No one ever came out here. The scrapyard was a graveyard of forgotten technology, a place for scavengers and mechanics who wanted to be left alone. The only time ships arrived was when someone was looking for something or someone. Sam moved to the window, pulling back the metal shutter just enough to see outside. A sleek, black vessel hovered over the far edge of the scrapyard, its engines kicking up plumes of dust. It was military-grade, small, fast, dangerous, and worse, it bore the markings of the Ian Consortium, one of the most ruthless corporate entities in the galaxy. Sam's heart pounded. They had found him, or worse, they had found Bolt. He turned sharply, his mind already racing through escape plans. Bolt, however, had already sensed the change in the air. He had stopped playing with the screws, his body tensed, his golden eyes locked on Sam. Sam forced himself to stay calm. "We need to hide." Bolt let out a low, questioning chirp, but Sam didn't have time to explain. He grabbed his old mechanic's jacket, scooping Bolt into his arms and tucking him inside. The dragon curled against his chest, pressing himself into the warmth of Sam's body as he moved quickly. Sam powered down the workshop's main systems, plunging the room into shadows. Then he moved to the back toward the hidden hatch that led beneath the floor. A knock echoed through the door. Sam froze. The voice that followed was smooth, confident, and cold, Samuel Vance. Sam clenched his jaw. They knew his name. A pause, then, "We know you're in there." Bolt tensed against him. Sam took a slow, steady breath, his brain worked at hyperspeed, calculating his odds and his options. He couldn't fight them directly. The consortium had technology and firepower that could turn his entire workshop into dust within seconds, but they didn't know about Bolt, not yet. He moved toward the hatch, whispering, "Stay quiet." Bolt didn't make a sound. Sam eased himself into the crawl space beneath the floor, the metal panels clicking shut above him. The darkness was suffocatingly airtight, but it was better than being caught above them. The workshop door slammed open. Boots, several pairs, heavy and deliberate, echoed, accompanied by the sound of scanners working to life. Sam held his breath. A new voice spoke, colder than the first, "He has to be here. Find him." Sam knew one thing with certainty, this wasn't just a coincidence. They had come looking for him because of Bolt, and that meant someone knew exactly what the little dragon was capable of. Sam tightened his grip around Bolt, his heartbeat loud in his ears. If they wanted him, they were going to have to fight for him. The silence beneath the floor was suffocating. Sam could hear his own heartbeat hammering against his ribs. He felt Bolt's tiny form pressed against his chest, warm and trembling. Above them, the heavy thud of boots on metal sent vibrations through the crawl space. The Ian Consortium agents were inside the workshop, searching. Sam knew how they operated. The Consortium wasn't the kind of organization that knocked on doors and asked politely. They took what they wanted. If they were here, it meant they already suspected something, and if they didn't find what they were looking for, they would tear the entire scrapyard apart. Bolt shifted against him, his small claws pressing lightly into Sam's jacket. A nervous chirp rose from his throat, barely above a whisper. Sam tightened his grip around him, silently willing him to stay quiet. Then came the voice, spreading out, "Check everything." A chair scraped against the floor, a workbench was pushed aside, tools clattered to the ground. They weren't just searching, they were ripping the place apart. Sam clenched his jaw. He couldn't just sit here and wait for them to find him, he had to act carefully. He reached for the emergency exit hatch at the far end of the crawl space. The tunnel LED outside was hidden beneath a pile of scrap. If he could make it to the tunnels beyond the scrapyard, he could disappear before the Consortium even realized he was gone. He moved slowly, easing the panel open. Cold air rushed in, the scent of rust and engine grease filling his lungs. He glanced down at Bolt, who was still curled against him, his golden eyes wide. "Time to go," Sam whispered. Bolt gave a small, trusting chirp. Sam took a breath and moved. He slid out of the crawl space and into the open air. The scrapyard stretched before him, endless heaps of twisted metal and shattered machinery, forming a maze of rust and shadows. He stayed low, ducking behind a fallen cargo hauler as he listened for movement. The workshop door slammed open behind him. "Where is he?" one of the agents growled. "He couldn't have gone far." Another voice replied, "Find him, now." Sam exhaled sharply. They had seconds, maybe less. He sprinted, keeping to the shadows, Bolt tucked securely against his chest. The little dragon's body tensed as the cold air hit him, but he didn't make a sound. Smart kid, Sam thought. The scrapyard was his home, his territory. He knew every inch of it, every broken passageway, every collapsed engine core that could serve as cover. If the agents thought they could corner him here, they had seriously underestimated him. He weaved between rusted-out starship hulls, his footsteps barely making a sound against the packed dirt. He could hear the agents fanning out behind him, their scanners humming as they searched. Then a bright red light flashed across the scrapyard. Sam cursed, he thought. They were using heat scanners, but Bolt was warm-blooded. He would show up like a beacon. Sam had to think fast. He ducked behind a large, overturned transport pod, wedging himself into the narrow gap between its hull and the ground. He could feel the energy from a pulse rifle charging nearby. One of the agents was sweeping the area, scanning for movement. He held his breath as a shadow passed just feet from where he was hiding. Bolt tensed in his arms but stayed still. Sam had never been prouder of him. The agent hesitated, then muttered, "Nothing on this side." "Keep moving." The footsteps retreated. Sam exhaled slowly, he needed to get out now before they started a second sweep. Then he heard something worse, the perimeter drones were being set up. Sam's stomach dropped. The Ian Consortium didn't just send men, they set machines. Patrol drones, equipped with motion sensors, thermal imaging, and enough firepower to rip through solid steel. If they deployed drones, escaping the scrapyard would be nearly impossible, they were running out of time. He tightened his grip around Bolt and whispered, "We have to fly." Bolt's ears perked up. Sam took a breath, then ran for it. He sprinted toward the old supply tower at the far end of the scrapyard, his boots pounded against the ground. The tower was high, one of the few structures still standing from the scrapyard's original settlement. If they could get to the top, Bolt could glide, not far, but far enough to escape the searchlights. The drones were launching, he could hear them working to life, their metallic bodies rising into the air. 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, Sam leapt onto the ladder, climbing as fast as he could. The metal creaked beneath his weight, but he didn't slow down. He could already see the drones turning their sensors, locking onto him. Bolt, he panted, reached the top. "You ready, Bolt?" Sam asked. Bolt let out a determined chirp. Sam smiled. "Good. Fly." Sam threw Bolt into the air for a moment, everything froze. The little dragon flapped his wings, panicked, his small body twisting against the wind. Sam's heart stopped. Had he made a mistake? Had he pushed Bolt too soon? Then instinct took over. Bolt caught the wind, his wings stretched wide, shimmering in the dim, scrapyard lights. He glided wobbly at first, but then steadier, his tail flicking to adjust his balance, and just like that, he was flying. Sam didn't have time to admire it. The drones had locked onto him, a red targeting beam scanning his position. He couldn't jump, he'd never survive the fall. Instead, he grabbed the nearest support cable and slid down. The metal burned against his palms, but he didn't stop. He hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. A pulse blast scorched the ground where he had been standing seconds ago. Sam didn't slow down. He ran, dodging between rusted wreckage while keeping his eyes on Bolt. The dragon was fighting the wind, his tiny body struggling against the currents. He wasn't strong enough for long-distance flight yet, and he wouldn't make it far alone. Sam had to reach him. He sprinted toward a collapsed crane, vaulting over debris. He could hear the drones closing in, the agents shouting orders, their boots pounding against the metal. Bolt let out a desperate chirp, his energy fading. Sam pushed everything into his final leap, arms outstretched, heart pounding. Bolt crashed into his chest. Sam caught him, rolled, and landed behind a massive pile of engine cores, using the thick metal as cover. His lungs burned, his body achy, but Bolt was safe. Sam let out a breathless laugh. "We got to work on your landings, kid," he said, as Bolt whined, nudging against his chest. Footsteps approached, the agents weren't giving up. Sam's grip tightened, they had one chance left. "You trust me?" he asked Bolt. The little dragon blinked, then chirped softly. Sam smirked. "Good. Hold on." Then he pulled out a detonator from his jacket and pressed the button. The entire scrapyard exploded. The explosion shattered the silence of the scrapyard, sending a shock wave through the air that rattled Sam's bones. Flames erupted from the old fuel canisters he had rigged earlier, sending thick plumes of black smoke into the sky. The wreckage groaned as twisted metal collapsed in on itself, creating a cascading avalanche of debris. It was pure chaos. The Ian Consortium agents scattered, their voices lost in the deafening roar. The drones, caught in the shock wave, spun wildly out of control before crashing into the wreckage below. And in the center of it all, Sam ran. Bolt clung tightly to his chest, his small claws digging into Sam's jacket, as they weaved through the flames and rubble. The little dragon trembled, overwhelmed by the noise and heat, but he trusted Sam. Sam knew they had only seconds before the agents were regrouped. The explosion had bought them time, but not much, they needed an escape route. His eyes darted across the scrapyard, searching. Then there, a half-buried starship lay ahead, one of the many abandoned wrecks he had salvaged parts from over the years. It was old, rusted, and most of its systems were dead, but it had one thing they needed, a functional thruster. Sam didn't slow down. He climbed onto the wreckage, his boots slipping against the curved hull. The agents were regrouping their weapons, humming to life, red laser sights scanning through the smoke. Come on, Sam muttered as he reached the ship's control panel. He ripped open the rusted cover, revealing the damaged wiring inside. Bolt lifted his head, chirping weakly. Sam didn't hesitate. All right, kid, I need that spark. Bolt blinked, understanding. He stretched out his small claws, touching the exposed wires. A surge of blue energy pulsed from his scales, racing through the circuits. The ship hung to life, the thruster ignited, spewing a jet of fire that engulfed the ground behind them. The nearest agent dove for cover, barely escaping the flames. Sam grinned. That's my boy. With the thruster firing, the starship lurched, its frame shuddering as the heat melted through the wreckage, holding it down. It wasn't flying, not yet, but it was moving, and that was enough. Sam grabbed Bolt and jumped just as the wrecked ship tilted, crashing down onto the agents below. Metal screeched as the impact sent another wave of dust and debris into the air. Sam hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact, his ribs ached, but he forced himself up. Bolt was still clutched in his arms. The agents were in full retreat, their ranks broken by the explosion and falling wreckage. Their leader, the one with the cold, calculating voice, barked orders through the chaos, "Get back to the ship, we're regrouping." Sam exhaled sharply. They weren't giving up, they would be back, and next time they wouldn't make the mistake of underestimating him. The air was thick with smoke, the yard a war zone of twisted metal and burning wreckage. Sam's lungs burned as he sprinted through the maze of debris, with Bolt curled against his chest. Every muscle in his body screamed for him to stop and rest, but he couldn't afford to slow down, not with them still hunting him. The Ian Consortium agents had retreated, but only temporarily. Sam knew better than to think they had given up. They never gave up, the only reason they had pulled back was to regroup, to come back with something worse. And when they did, Sam and Bolt needed to be gone. Sam's mind raced, where could they go? The scrapyard had been home for years, but now it was compromised, the village nearby, too risky, the agents would tear it apart looking for them. The only safe option was off-world, but without a ship that was impossible, unless Sam stopped his breath, coming in short gasps, as he turned to a nearby wreck. It wasn't just any wreck, it was his wreck, a starship, his starship, half buried under a mountain of scrap. It had once been beautiful, a sleek, fast courier vessel meant for smuggling across the outer rim. Now it was little more than a rusted shell, a graveyard of old memories, but it still had one last flight left in it. Bolt lifted his head, sensing Sam's sudden determination. Sam ran a hand over the ship's battered hull. "All right, girl, time to wake up," he said, moving quickly as he pried open the hatch. The inside was a mess, dust-covered panels, wires ripped out, everything broken. It wasn't just a salvage job, it was a miracle waiting to happen. Bolt sniffed the control console, letting out a small chirp of curiosity. Sam grinned. "Yeah, I know she's a mess." He sat down, rolling up his sleeves. "But if we work fast, we might just get out of here alive." Sam worked like a man possessed, stripping wires, reconnecting circuits, bypassing long-dead security protocols. His hands moved fast, his mind moving faster. Bolt sat beside him, watching with those intelligent, golden eyes. Then, slowly, the little dragon reached out his claws, touching the exposed power core. A spark of blue energy rippled through the ship. Sam's breath hitched, the lights flickered, the engines groaned, systems were coming back online. Bolt's abilities weren't just for small repairs, he could breathe life into things that shouldn't work. Sam stared at him in awe. "You're something else, kid." Bolt let out a tiny huff, then sneezed, a flicker of blue flame. Flame erupted from his snout, vanishing into the stale air. Sam laughed, and then the C-panel buzzed to life. His stomach dropped as Samuel Vance, the cold, precise voice of the lead agent, crackled through the speakers. Sam's fists clenched. "They had found you, a resourceful man," the agent continued, "but you're out of time." Sam swallowed hard. "Turn over the creature," the agent said, "and we will let you live." Bolt whimpered, pressing against Sam's side. Sam ran a hand over Bolt's back. "You hear that?" he muttered. "They think I'm just going to hand you over." Bolt growled softly. Sam smirked. "Yeah, I don't think so either." He slammed his fist against the engine ignition switch. The ship roared to life, engines fired, thrusters engaged, the hull shuddered as the long-dead vessel awakened with a vengeance. Dust and debris blasted outward, rattling the scrapyard. The comm crackled again. Sam cut them off. "Go to hell." Then he grabbed Bolt, strapped himself into the pilot's chair, and punched the throttle. The ship lurched upward, metal groaning in protest as the landing thrusters barely held together. As the ground fell away beneath them, they broke free, the sky stretched wide above them, an endless sea of stars waiting to be claimed. And for the first time in years, Sam felt something he had long forgotten, freedom. Bolt chirped, curling up against him, and Sam grinned. "All right, kid," he muttered, "let's go find a home." The ship groaned under the strain of its sudden ascent, its aged thrusters sputtering as it fought against dense gravity. Sam gritted his teeth, his hands gripping the control yokes tightly, feeling the turbulence shake the entire frame. Bolt clung to his shoulder, his tiny claws digging into Sam's jacket as the vibrations rattled through the cockpit. The little dragon let out a distressed chirp, his golden eyes wide with a mix of fear and exhilaration. "We're all right, did you?" Sam muttered, adjusting the stabilizers as they breached the upper atmosphere. "Just got to hold together a little longer." Alarms blared across the console, half the ship systems were redlining, oxygen was running low, the life support was barely functional, and the left thruster was flickering like a dying star. It was a miracle they had even gotten this far, but the real problem was coming up fast. Behind them, a bright red warning flashed across the NAV screen, "Incoming vessels detected." Sam cursed under his breath. The Ian Consortium wasn't letting them go without a fight. Through the cockpit window, 3 sleek, black fighters burst from the planet's upper atmosphere, their engines burning a brilliant blue as they closed the distance. They were fast, too fast. Sam's old rust bucket wasn't built for dogfights. Bolt let out a low growl, sensing the tension. "I know," Sam muttered, flipping switches and rerouting power to the rear shields. "They're coming in hot." A voice crackled over the comm. It was him, the cold-voiced agent from before, Samuel Vance. "I advise you to power down your engines and surrender, you cannot outrun us," the man said smoothly. "Watch me," Sam scoffed as he yanked the controls hard, sending the ship into a sudden downward spiral. The fighters adjusted quickly, but the sharp move had bought them a few extra seconds. Sam took a deep breath. Thinking fast, he knew there had to be a way out. His eyes darted across the starfield, searching for an opening. Then there, a massive asteroid field loomed just ahead, its jagged rocks twisting and tumbling in a slow, chaotic dance, a death trap for most pilots. But Sam wasn't most pilots, and he had a trick up his sleeve. He turned to Bolt. "Kid, I need you to trust me again." The dragon blinked, tilting his head. "I need one of those sparks," Sam said, pointing to the thruster control panel. "We're going to need everything." "This ship's got," Bolt hesitated, then slowly reached out a small claw. The moment he touched the exposed wiring, a pulse of blue energy surged through the circuits. The ship lurched forward, its failing thrusters suddenly burning with renewed intensity. Sam grinned. "That's what I'm talking about." He gunned the engines, aiming straight for the asteroid field behind them. The Ian fighters hesitated. Even the best-trained pilots weren't stupid enough to follow someone into a field of spinning death. But they also weren't giving up, they were locking missiles. "Sam!" Bolt let out a startled chirp. Sam's grip tightened. No choice now. They plunged into the asteroid field. Rocks the size of city blocks spun past them, some drifting lazily, others moving at devastating speeds. Sam maneuvered between them with pure instinct, skimming along the surfaces and pushing the ship to its limits. The first missile slammed into an asteroid behind them, sending debris flying in every direction. The second barely missed their left wing, grazing the hull and sending a warning light flashing across the dashboard. The fighters followed, weaving through the rocks, but they weren't as fast, not anymore. Bolt lifted his head suddenly, his scales flashing with electric blue energy. Sam saw it too, an opening, a tight gap between two massive, tumbling boulders, just wide enough for their ship but too narrow for the fighters. "Hold on!" Sam yelled. They shot through the gap, metal screeching as the edges of the hole barely cleared the rock walls. The fighters weren't as lucky, one of them slammed into an asteroid and exploded in a bright burst of fire, while the other two pulled back, breaking formation. Then the NAV screen flickered, no hostiles detected. Sam let out a shaky laugh. "They're gone," he whispered. Bolt chirped, nudging his cheek. Sam grinned, running a hand down Bolt's back. "You did good, kid," he said, but he wasn't celebrating yet because now they had to figure out where to go next. The ship drifted through the empty void, far from the scrapyard, far from the consortium's reach, for now. Sam sat in the pilot's chair, staring at the vastness of space ahead of them. Bolt curled in his lap, his body warm and steady, his breathing slow. The little dragon had given everything during the escape, now he was exhausted. Sam exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He had no illusions about what had happened back there. The Ian Consortium wasn't just after him, they wanted Bolt, and that meant they'd never stop searching. His gaze drifted to the little dragon, who shifted in his sleep, his tail flicking slightly. Sam had never expected to care this much about anything other than his machines. He had spent most of his life fixing things, keeping his head down, staying out of trouble, but Bolt wasn't just something to fix, he was someone, and Sam wasn't about to let anyone take him away. He reached for the NAV controls, pulling up the star map. There were rumors about places the consortium couldn't reach, outer rim colonies, hidden planets, places where outcasts and fugitives disappeared, a fresh start. Bolt let out a small, sleepy chirp. Sam smirked. "Yeah, kid, I'm thinking the same thing." He input the coordinates, the ship's engines hummed, glowing faintly with new life. With a deep breath, Sam pushed the throttle forward. They vanished into the stars, leaving the past behind, a mechanic and his dragon, heading toward the future.